I'm Chase Hughes, that's Chris Miller, and on today's episode of Off the Bench, we are turning the page on the Wizards' 25-26 season. We'll give our initial thoughts on the highly touted 2026 draft class. We'll also take an early look at what kind of veteran player the Wizards could add this summer, and we'll also discuss comps for what next year could look like if they start ascending as planned. I say if, although yesterday Bub Carrington corrected me and said when. So not if, it's
I
when.
like that. I like
Yeah,
it.
confidence. But first, the season is over. They finished 17-65. That's good for last in the NBA. And the good news is they will have the best odds in the draft lottery, which will take place in Chicago on May 10th. A real quick look at those odds: 14% for the first overall pick. That's tied with the Pacers and Nets for best odds in the league. 13.4% for the second pick, 12.7% for third, 12% for fourth, and then it jumps. It skyrockets to 47.9% for the fifth pick. But Chris, the good news is they are insured a top 5 pick.
The beauty of that too is how good everyone is saying this draft can ultimately be. I'm not going to go all the way in chips first, saying this could be potentially 2003. We'll have to wait. I think that's a lot of hyperbole so far, but there is a lot of quality value at really almost every position except center in the first round. I think there might be only one center in the first round as I'm looking at it, Chase, but tons of guards, tons of big guards, and a lot of wings.
Indeed. So right now, you're insured a top 5 pick. Give me 5 players you think could be the first 5 off the board in June.
Well, only one of my five has fully declared and put his chips in that he's going to declare. So the other four are, I think they're going to enter the draft, but nothing's official yet. Obviously, number one is AJ Dybantsa from BYU. This guy, to me, has that positional size of what the NBA looks like right now, being 6'9", long wingspan, super athletic. Chase, I see a lot of these kids before they get to college, and I've seen him on the AAU circuit for 2 years, and I thought, when he's ready, he's going to plug and play right into the NBA. It was pretty obvious, I think, when he was like 16 years old. The other one is obviously Darryn Peterson from Kansas. This notion of like what's up with him, I've been burned before by wondering, how does this guy with these injuries and these cramps and all this stuff, how will he fit in the NBA? I've learned my lesson, especially talking to CJ McCollum about this kid who they both grew up in Canton, Ohio. CJ fully endorsed him months ago when he was a part of the Wizards, so I kept my eye on him. Cameron Boozer has the lineage, obviously, with his father, Carlos. A lot of Wizards fans that was in D.C. that went to Capital One Arena saw him play with that school from Durham. You know that school. Caleb Wilson is the guy from North Carolina that has already committed to the draft. Chase, I have a special place in my heart for Caleb Wilson playing for the Tar Heels and saw him day one really dominate college basketball before suffering the injuries. And the guy that's going to be in my top five that's not Darius Acuff is Keaton Wagler, the 6'6" point guard from Illinois. Once again, Brad Underwood has done it again in terms of putting NBA players in the draft. We got one of them ourselves and Will Riley. His backcourt made a year ago, Kasparis Yakichonis. He gave us buckets throughout the year. So once again, Illinois is going to have another high draft pick. So those are my five. What about you?
I got a similar top 5: Dybantsa, Peterson, Boozer, Wilson, but I'll put Darius Acuff in there. He finished the season so strong. Such a good scorer and facilitator who can just light it up from 3, both off the catch and off the dribble. Obviously, some concerns about his size and his defense, but I think he's going to be tough to pass up. So right now, I expect him to be the 4th or 5th pick in this draft. But we'll get into more of that, especially in future episodes, but also in the rest of this episode. But first, a few facts and figures about the Wizards lottery odds. So first of all, according to Real GM's database, they have never had the best odds in the lottery before. They've been second 5 different times. The 2 times they got the number 1 pick in the lottery were 2001 and 2010. Kwame Brown and John Wall, obviously. They had the 3rd best odds in '01 and the 5th best odds in 2010. And when you look at the offseason, May 10th is when the draft lottery will take place. That's in Chicago. Chris, you and I will both be there documenting it for everybody. But that's also when the combine takes place. So the combine starts in Chicago the 10th, and it runs to the 17th. And basically the way it works is they hold the lottery on the 10th. The 11th will be measurements for all these players. And then the 12th, that morning, May 12th happens to be my birthday.
Happy
The
birthday,
12th,
dog.
thanks. The 12th, that morning is when we'll talk to all the players and then they'll start doing shooting drills and stuff like that. So you'll learn a lot about these players in that week in May. And again, we'll be in Chicago for it. Then the draft just got announced June 23rd and 24th, the first and second rounds. And then June 30th is when free agent negotiations begin. And then the Las Vegas Summer League is July 9th to the 19th. Should be another fun summer league for the Wizards, not only with whoever they pick in the draft, but Trey Johnson, Will Riley, Jamir Watkins. They should be on that roster as well. But now that we're looking ahead to the draft, we're turning the page to the offseason. I want to share our early thoughts on this 2026 draft class. So much has been said about it, and we'll get into individual players, player comps, and all those sorts of things. We'll interview people about the draft in the coming weeks and months. But let's give our early thoughts and let's use our 3 points segment to structure it. So, what's your first point about the 2026 draft class?
Quality depth, I think, at the wing position, big point guards. I think now what you're seeing in the NBA chase is size matters, not only with your bigs, but guards. Every night when I'm getting ready to call a game, I'm looking to see what the opposition's point guards look like. They're all big. They're all 6'4", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8". Will Riley for us, 6'10", that can play make. So I think we're starting to see the evolution of the game with guys being a little bit bigger with the basketball. And not only does that help you offensively, but on the defensive end, if you're switching off on another guy, it's not like he's got 3 or 4 inches on you. So I think in this draft, besides, I think, A cuff, every other guard that is projected to be in the first round is 6'4" or taller. So that's a huge key for me when I'm looking at potentially if Washington goes down that route, will they get a big guard to play alongside the Trey Johnsons and the Trey Youngs of the world?
Yeah, great point, and we'll find out a lot about that at the
Oh, by the way, those
combine.
measurements, yes.
Yeah, the
We're gonna
measurements.
find out how tall you really are.
Right. Because that's a thing every year. Now everyone's got to participate. And you mentioned the guards, like Kingston Flemings, I believe, is listed at 6'4", but I don't know. Is he 6'2", 6'3"? Because he's one of my favorite prospects in this draft. But then I saw him play Keaton Wagler in the tournament, and I've seen Keaton Wagler play in person. He's a legit 6'6". Like I saw him play against Maryland. He looks the part, but he was quite a bit taller than Kingston Fleming. So we'll see what, for instance, he comes out as. My first point is that this could be a generational draft. You kind of alluded to this early on about maybe the best draft since 2003. A lot of people have thrown that out there, but it also does not have a generational prospect. There were people who said that, oh, maybe Darryn Peterson or Dybantsa or Boozer or generational prospect. They aren't. I think generational, if you're taking that word by the definition of it, that means Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, Victor Wembanyama, best prospect of a generation, right? But what could make this draft class generational is the depth at the top. I think you've got a couple guys who would be the number one pick in the average draft. AJ Dybantsa and Darryn Peterson in particular. I think there's some other years where they both could have been the number one pick. I think people got a little bit carried away by saying, like, remember there was that report that like Cooper Flagg might be the sixth best player in this draft. I think that was ridiculous. My theory, and this will hit close to home for you, is that whoever said that went to North Carolina, right? Whoever said that hates Duke because it makes no sense. But it is a very good draft class.
Yeah.
And I think the depth is a big strength, and that could work in the Wizards' favor because as we went through the odds, their most likely pick is fifth. But if you're picking fifth in this draft, you might be able to get a player who would normally go third, maybe even second in a normal draft.
Just to kind of piggyback what you said about is it a generational draft? I had an executive tell me this during the year. Cooper Flagg would have been the number one pick the year before he declared, the year he actually was drafted, and potentially 3 more drafts down the road. That says a lot about Cooper Flagg, one, and two, the generational thing that they're talking about with this draft class. If Cooper Flagg would have stayed in college and to his sophomore year, he'd still be the number one pick in the draft this year. So that really kind of speaks to how great Cooper was and the fact that there's not really anybody in this draft that would have leapfrogged him if he was in this draft in June.
Agreed. And I think people sold Dylan Harper short in that
Mhm.
conversation as well. But also, if this is to be a generational draft class, it's got to be better than last year's, right? And as we
Right,
saw, that was a really good rookie class. I think, going into the draft, I didn't expect those guys to hit the ground running like they did with Con
right.
Knippel and Cooper Flagg and Edgecombe and Dylan Harper. And Trey Johnson proved to be a good pick at sixth. And how about Will Riley at 21st? So a lot of depth that year, of course. But what's your second point about the 26 draft class?
This pertains to Washington, just Washington, regardless of where they pick 1 through 5. Whoever is drafted in the top 5 will not be asked day one to lead this franchise. This is not John Wall in 2010 where he gets drafted. There's this red carpet out on F Street and he walks out and there's going to be the marching bands playing and all the people from the city anointing him the face of the franchise. It doesn't matter which player it is. That player is going to be a part of the rotation, a major part of the rotation, but not being asked to be the face of the franchise because of Trae Young, because of Anthony Davis, and because of the last 3 years of bringing in young players who have all gotten better. Bilal, Keyshawn, Bub, Alex, the list goes on and on. Whoever this first round pick is this June doesn't have to be the guy that comes in and raises his hand and is like, I'm this face of the franchise. Everybody get on my shoulders. I think that is going to be super beneficial for whoever Washington picks.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a lot less pressure for that player
Mhm.
than there has been in the past for other guys, and that could be a good thing. They might even encounter a situation where there's a ton of depth at their position, and they're going to have to compete for minutes right
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's going to be the case if they get the first overall pick and it's Dybantsa or Peterson, but certainly if it's like the fourth or fifth pick, that player is probably going to have to earn their role, which could be really fun to watch and just be a great problem for the Wizards to have to try to sort through a rotation where a guy who's drafted that high in a draft class like this isn't guaranteed anything.
We've, as long as I've been here, there has never been a first round pick that is selected that high that can kind of ease their way into this organization. I've been here 19 years. It's never happened. Every one of those picks that have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have had to plug and play right away and go through some real tough waters. And some of them didn't have the veterans that could help them kind of navigate those waters. So again, I think Washington has put themselves in a really good place, Chase, where this young man doesn't have to come here and be the savior.
Now, whoever that is might be a savior of sorts if they do get the number one pick. And that leads me to my second point, which is AJ Dybantsa looks like the number one pick. Right now, we don't have a consensus number one. Oftentimes, we go through the whole college season. We know who the number one pick's going to be. That was the case with like John Wall, Cade Cunningham, right? But oftentimes, we get to the lottery, and that night, you know who the number one pick is going to be. It's like whoever gets the number one pick, you know the prize they're going to get. We don't have that right now, but I think it's going to be AJ Dybantsa. He's just got the fewest question marks of the guys at the top. You mentioned this. He's got the positional size. Darryn Peterson doesn't necessarily have that. He's got good size for a combo guard, but it's not like he's 6'7, 6'8. Cam Boozer's 6'9, 6'10. He would have positional size if he was like 6'11, 7 feet, right? Dybantsa's a 6'9 jumbo wing. He's also extremely athletic. He's extremely skilled on the offensive end. He's not a perfect prospect, of course, but in terms of his intangibles, he might be pretty close to perfect in terms of the competitive fire, the intensity. He seems to be really serious about his craft. There's no questions about his personality in the locker room or off the court. So he checks off a lot of boxes. I think he has the fewest weaknesses of the three. And he's an underrated passer, and he generates a decent amount of steals. I think there's questions about the defensive end and his feel on that end of the floor. But I think if you're just looking at the totality of it, he's the most versatile player with the positional size, with the intangibles, and the athleticism that you look for all those kinds of things when you're thinking, okay, who looks like a number one draft pick?
Chase, you can look at all the data points, and I agree with everything that you say. My eyes, the first time I saw him, was his competitive motor. There's a lot of guys in this draft that have all the physical tools and all the basketball skill, but this kid's competitive motor jumped out to me when he was 16. And that's something I don't think you can really coach. That's something that you just have to have in you. His TikTok beats like he wants it every night. And those guys, when I'm in gyms watching these kids, it stands out to me more than anything, more than shot diet, more than high basketball IQ. All these things are important, right? But if your motor on every play is in like fifth gear, that's the separator from me. And that's the separator from Dybantsa and really everybody else. Caleb Wilson is the other one that has that competitiveness about him that transcends high school, college, and then ultimately to the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dybantsa's reliable. He plays a
Mhm.
lot of games and he gives a reliable effort, like you mentioned. And I think he's mentally tough. I was just so impressed. Like, obviously, we all tuned in to watch him play against Darryn Peterson, and Peterson got the best of that matchup. But then after that, some concerns started to emerge about Peterson, checking himself out of games and his injuries and everything like that. And what did Dybantsa do? He tuned out the noise, he put his head down, and he just got better. And I was just so impressed with how he responded to the way everyone like sort of formed a narrative around those two. It was like, oh, Darryn Peterson is locked up the number one spot. And then you fast forward 2, 3 weeks later, and it's like, I don't know. Look at AJ Dybantsa right now and what's
Mhm.
happened with Darryn Peterson. So I was so impressed with the way he responded. But what's
The
your
body
third?
type, too, the body
Yeah.
type of what the NBA looks like now, it's AJ Dybantsa. But again, we've got a long time for the interview. There's so much that goes into this, Chase, and we'll talk about this in other pods. But from my experience, until a team can sit down with this guy for about 10 minutes and ask him like really hard questions and really test what this person's makeup is and if this person fits what that organization is looking for, we're just kind of just having fun talking about it. But until these players actually sit down with these teams and you kind of get that, okay, what's this dude really like? I'm curious to see that part. They'll never tell us, but you'll know by who they draft who fits, especially Washington. I think these guys have done a really good job the last couple of years of when they go to Chicago, they have a very specific thing that they're looking for in these players, and they found it so far starting with Bilal and ending up with like Jameer this year.
No question. Will Dawkins said they draft people, not players,
Yes,
and
yes.
that the interview process is very important. And like you said, there's commonalities between the players that they've drafted. They're all serious, they love basketball, and they work hard. And that's the stuff that goes beyond the fact that they all have positional size, they can dribble, pass, shoot, and they all project to be pretty decent defenders at a minimum. But what is your third point on the 26 draft class?
They're all really good. This is really the
Hashtag
depth
analysis.
the depth of this draft. Like they're all really good. There's not one of these guys, and I'll just say this in the top five. I'll just use that because that's where Washington is. You're not going to go wrong. There's not a wrong answer to this test. It's just who fits better, right? When you bring in Trey Young and Anthony Davis, you've plugged in two really important spots: the point guard position and whatever position AD wants to play. Does he want to play forward? Does he want to play five? But you've plugged in two guys that have combined for 14 All-Star appearances. They've won. They've won at high levels. AD's won a championship. Trey Young's got to a conference final. So I think whoever they take at five, you're not going to miss. It just has to fit whatever you're looking for. Are you looking for a guard, a wing, or a big? And you've got that in the top five. So the Wizards have what my man Drew Gooden likes to say, great problems.
That kind of leads me to my third point, which is there's a lot of scoring and a lot of guards at the
Mhm.
top of this draft. And by that, I mean you're going to really have to split hairs between guards who are very similar to each
Mhm.
other, right? This draft class has a lot of hype, I think, because there's a lot of players at the top who have size and athleticism who look like future stars, and they can also score. And conversely, I think it might lack in defense in the top 10, right? Last year, you had Cooper Flagg, you had VJ Edgecombe. I don't see two-way talents quite like that at the top of this draft. And you also had Kaman Malawach go to the Suns in the top 10. There's no rim protector like that in this draft. What it is it's a lot of guards who can score. So you have Dybantsa, who's a wing, Boozer and Wilson, they're fours. But aside from them, it's Darryn Peterson, Darius Acuff, Keaton Wagler, Kingston Flemings, Mikel Brown, LeBaron Fallon, Braden Burries. All those guys could go in the lottery. They're all guards. The majority of them are like 6'4", 6'5" to 6'6". And that's interesting because, like, how do you decide between, Kingston Flemings and Keaton Wagler or Keaton Wagler and Mikel Brown? That's not going to be easy to do. And it could be something to watch for the Wizards, who this is probably only going to be a situation if they fall to like fourth or fifth, but they are guard heavy at the moment. So, regardless, honestly, of any position that they select, there's probably going to be some overlap on their roster. Because, like, think about it, Cameron Boozer, Caleb Wilson, you're stepping onto a roster that has Anthony Davis and Alex Sarr in the front court. So either way, there's going to be some depth that they'll have to sort through come training camp.
Keyshawn can also play the four. He can
Yeah,
play that position. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that's already here that have been here for a while, and they're not just going to just step aside and just be
right.
like, "Hey man, come on in here and get these rotational minutes." And that's the fun part about it. The beauty is it's all about competition here.
Good problems to have, as Drew
Yep.
Gooden told you. All right. Well, what we'll do next is called Empty the Bench, answer some quick questions. And the first one is, what kind of veteran player might make sense for the Wizards as you review the roster right now? Obviously, some of this will be dictated by the draft, but right now, as they look ahead to next season, they want to level up. What's like a gap that they could fill in terms of a veteran player?
Backup five for me. And now the question is, what kind of backup five? Is it Juju Reese 2 inches taller? Is it a really athletic five? That's where I think the Wizards front office is going to have to figure it out. But I think a backup five, veteran backup five, I think will be really important as they start to become a team that competes and should be judged on competing every night. I think that position kind of solidifies if something goes wrong in terms of injury or whatever, you've got somebody in that position that can plug and play if needed.
Ideally, someone who can rebound. Ideally,
Yes.
someone with some heft to them. I've documented it on this show. The Wizards are the lightest team in the league in terms of average weight this season. So if you could get some muscle in the middle,
Mhm.
that would be a good thing. For me, it's a strong ball stopping defensive guard. I'm not sure how many minutes would be offered. I mentioned there's sort of a logjam at guard already. They might end up drafting another guard, but somebody who's got a big upper body and quick feet to provide some resistance on the perimeter, because they have defensive pieces everywhere else, right? Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George on the wing. They've got Anthony Davis and Alex Sarr. I think someone who can stop dribble drives could help tie everything together. Again, probably in like a third point guard role or something like that. But I think that would be a nice thing to have at their disposal. All right, next year, if the Wizards or when the Wizards do
There you go.
ascend, what's a comp, like another team that's done it before? What's a comp for what it could look like?
I'm going to go with the Detroit Pistons with this caveat that the Wizards do get the number one pick in this draft in June. You think what Detroit did, getting Cade Cunningham number one overall, and then look what the subsequent pieces look like around him. Jalen Duren. I'm not comparing Alex Sarr to Jalen Duren, but a big that can play alongside a big point guard. And then a guy like Asar Thompson, who is a really good defender, very athletic. You put him on the wing, there's a lot of switchability in his game. So for me, the comp would be kind of what the Pistons did. Now, they did get Cade, and then for 2 straight years, Chase, they had the worst record and they picked fifth. So I don't want that juju on the Wizards, but I will juju, no pun
Juju, there
intended.
you go.
No pun intended. But I would say the Detroit Pistons. What about you?
Okay. For me, it's the Charlotte Hornets from this past season for a few different reasons. First of all, the Hornets made a huge jump into the play-in mix, right? I think that's realistic for the Wizards. Like, I don't think their jump next year is going to lead to them being like the second seed in the East.
Mhm.
That would be an enormous leap forward. I think them making the play-in tournament's more realistic. Secondly, I think it's more likely to happen where they become a really good offensive team than a really good defensive team. Just looking at their personnel, I could see like Trae Young and Trey Johnson, for instance, like overnight becoming one of the best 3-point shooting duos in the league, a la LaMelo Ball and Con Knipple, right? I think the Wizards could become a team that starts outscoring teams rather than getting a ton of stops, and then maybe the defense comes together over time. And then lastly, there's just an obvious parallel for me between LaMelo Ball and Trae Young. Same position. They're both really good at scoring, really good at passing, and they stretch the floor with long threes. And they're both fun to watch because of that. So I think the Hornets could be a good parallel for them. What do you think about that?
Well, that'd be good because we see them 4 times a year, and I'm old, Chase. I still love divisional rivalries, and if you're telling me like the comp would be, we get to see LaMelo and Trey. I mean, LaMelo has seen Trey 4 times a year, being that Trey was in our division. But that's a really good comp too. And I'm glad you said Con Knipple. I don't know if we want to put this out here on Front Street, but somebody tried to tell you.
You did call
I'm not
that.
gonna name no names, but
You did call that he would be really good. I was like,
I
I
don't know if he
like
was
him,
this
but
good though.
I know I was like, I like him, but like maybe the eighth pick or something. I don't know about fourth. And then what does he do? He hits the ground running as the best 3-point shooter as a rookie that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And probably one of the like top 40 players, top 50 players in the league already.
You know, a funny
Um,
thing about him was the game before we played them. I think this is the first time we were in Charlotte. You know how all these games kind of just they're just going and going and going. He got the fastest to 100 in Cleveland. So I'm watching that game and they're like, "Hey, that's his 103." And I'm thinking, "Oh, well, I'm glad he got that done before we played him." And because he really changed their franchise
yeah,
overnight.
overnight, he ended up hitting like 273 threes, which is unbelievable as a rookie. If you did an all rookie team of the decade, like the 2020s, not only would he be a lock for that roster, he might start.
That's how I kind of hope this draft pick will be for Washington. Again, like you said, I like your comp. I think I like it more than my Pistons one. I actually like that because you already had LaMelo in place. You already had Brandon Miller. You had Miles Bridges, the requisite pieces around, some veterans. And then you literally just inserted him. That's literally what you did. You literally took him, put him in your program, and then they were off and running. So going from lottery to play in seems to make sense. For Washington to get a player in the top five, whoever it is, if they could come in, I'm not expecting them to have the Con Knipple impact. That's
Right.
crazy,
That's
right? Because
very rare.
that's very rare. But if you insert whoever that draft pick is for Washington and they go from being worst record in the league to vying for a play-in, I think everyone in the city would be like, man, this is a win. We're off and running doing some good things. So kudos, brother. I'm with you. Charlotte's a good comp.
Yeah. And you got the top five pick. You're trying to make the play in next year. That's the dots you're trying to connect. And the
Yeah.
Hornets just did it in the same division as you mentioned. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Off the Bench. Chris and I will be talking a lot about the NBA draft in the coming weeks and months. As I mentioned, we'll be in Chicago, and we'll start working in some guests as we take a closer look at these prospects. Chris and I have both seen a lot of these guys in person, so you'll get in-depth breakdowns on what we noticed when we went to see them play. So make sure you're subscribed to Off the Bench wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the M Plus app and Monumental Sports Network's YouTube page. For Chris Miller, I'm Chase Hughes. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.